There are some critical differences between imagination, creativity, and innovation. Imagination is the ability to think of something that doesn't exist yet, but it could be something that's impossible, so it may not be practical. Creativity is coming up with something that's novel, but also effective. So it's sort of reining in your imagination and making it useful in some way. But of all the things that are creative, only some of them are going to be innovative. And innovative is defined as something that actually transforms the world, gets out there, and is marketable. It succeeds. So not everything that's creative ends up being innovative. So there's this nice progression from imagination to creativity to innovation. And economically, of course, what we're interested in is innovation.
And there is a lot of call now, a lot of interest now in developing a more creative education, as we realize that in the 21st century we need a more creative workforce, et cetera. And there are a lot of people out there now saying this is something we have to address.
Everybody knows that Einstein was a fantastic musician. What they probably don't know is that he said many, many times in interviews that his theory of relativity actually came from musical thinking. So it's the way that music is organized that he actually adapted to understanding how the physical universe works.
Sparks of Genius, which Bob and I wrote together, focuses on a set of 13 thinking tools, imaginative thinking tools. And these are skills that are cognitive or bodily in nature. And they are things that the capacities that we all have inside, but we don't necessarily exercise them very consciously. Things like our abilities to observe, or our ability to abstract, to take out the essence of something, to focus on what's most important. Bob mentioned that too. Also some things like pattern recognizing. We all recognize different patterns in nature or in our environment, and we're kind of geared to think that way. We also can form patterns. We can think with our body. We can know how to climb a tree without reading a set of verbal instructions to how to do that. We use our body to figure out how to climb that tree. So there are 13 of them, which is a sort of a long list to go through, but there are some that we recognize right away as being very important in everyone's lives. And the idea is, if you exercise these in a conscious way, you can dig more deeply into understanding your experience, or a set of knowledge that you want to learn in the classroom, or something that you're trying to understand and discover on your own.
A critical aspect of our tools for thinking approach to education is that it's very arts-centered. We want to put arts and crafts back at the center of education, because arts and crafts are the places where you actually develop and hone the critical thinking skills that we think you need. When we first put this message out to the public, when we first published Sparks of Genius, started lecturing about this, this was a very hard message to get across. Arts are being cut across the country. Crafts have essentially been eliminated from our school systems.
What we found was very interesting, because we know that scientists, the best scientists, the creative scientists, are using all the thinking tools that we talk about in Sparks of Genius, and the textbooks have none of them. When you find a few of the tools, it's in the very early grades, because we think, oh yes, children need to learn by hands-on, or they need to learn by enacting, when they're in second grade or third grade. But as soon as they sort of move into fifth grade and beyond, it's like, oh, take everything imaginative out, take everything creative out. All you need to know is the reason, the rationality, and the logic. And I think that speaks to why we're losing a lot of people in STEM subjects.
Sometimes artists and musicians can actually do science simply because of the skills that they've learned. So there's some really wonderful examples. One is Hedy Lamarr, who is the great actress, and George Antheil, who was a very famous composer. And they actually invented, based on musical techniques and concepts, something called frequency hopping, which is the way in which we protect all of your communications on your cell phone. Another interesting example is someone who used his art training in his work was a guy who actually invented cyclotrons, so high energy particle physics. And he said that not only did he use his skill as a sculptor when he was inventing these things, but that he tried to make the actual cyclotrons as beautiful as a sculpture, because science should be just as beautiful as art. Tools for thinking are critical for education for two reasons. One is that we discovered in identifying the tools that almost none of them are part of the standard curriculum. So if these are the tools that are essential to being creative, they are not in the education system. If we don't put them in there, we're simply not going to have creative students. They're not going to have the skills and the knowledge to be able to create novel things.